Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the Exit Readiness podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value and for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that is transferable and then exit successfully on your own terms and your own conditions. Our standard practice or format each episode is to have a guest with us, an expert, to discuss a particular area of expertise regarding to building value or exit. However, this morning's guest has proposed a change in format for today's episode, the turning of the tables, as he put it, Walter. So I'll first introduce our guest here, and then he's going to introduce his turning the tables idea for today's conversation. Our guest today is my long-term friend, Andrew Mahr. A number of years ago, Andrew and I worked together on a management team for a nonprofit ministry with a mission of planting churches in the United States and around the world. Andrew joined our team not long after graduating from Georgetown University and was considered, and at the time was considering continuing on to going to law school, but he decided to stay on board with us instead and plant churches. And then as a result of his success there in management, he was presented with not a few attractive business opportunities and went in that direction instead, and it's turned out to be a very wise decision on his part. Andrew is simply one of the smartest and most talented guys or people I've ever worked with. He's currently the Chief Customer Officer at Triblio. Triblio is an account-based marketing firm here in Northern Virginia, founded by another good friend, Andre Yee. So Andrew, hey buddy, thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, great to talk to you again.
So before I ask you to describe and lead your proposed format for this morning's episode, please take a few minutes, if you would, and provide listeners with more of an understanding of what Triblio does and who you and the clients that you do it for.
Sure. So Triblio is an account-based marketing platform technology startup. So we enable marketing and sales teams to find the accounts that are most likely to buy from them and then focus their marketing and sales efforts very specifically on moving those accounts into a pipeline, into a sales conversation, and then closing and growing those accounts over time, maximizing the value of those accounts over time. So that's what we do as a technology company, and we are now part of IDG, which is a global data and marketing services company that's been around for 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, so Walter and I, we invited you on, Andrew, because, in helping owners build value in their business and grow, marketing, of course, is a big piece, and accounts-based marketing is a big piece of marketing at this point. And so that was our motivation for having you on. And so we're going to have you back so that you can actually talk more about it, because it's an important topic for business owners and their businesses who want to grow. So, okay, now go ahead and please explain and describe your innovative idea. I'd just like you to be innovative.
Yeah, so I was prepping for this conversation, Pat, and looking forward to it, and just going back through the podcast archives, and I was shocked to find that somebody who knows as much about building strong executive teams and knows how important executive team performance is to selling a business, to being able to transfer that business is, that you hadn't covered this topic yet. And so I thought about your audience, and if I was one of them, I would want to hear your expertise on that topic before I heard my expertise on account-based marketing. So I prepped some questions really to revisit.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When you actually brought it up, I was somewhat embarrassed, because that is a big gap there. And Walter, you would agree, there's not, other than strong financials, there's not a stronger driver of value than building a what we would call a next level management team within a business. So good catch. Good catch on your part. So go ahead and take over and lead the conversation.
Absolutely. Okay, so Pat, one of the earliest conversations I remember having with you, and this was in our work together in your office, was about that transition from managing the work, your own results directly, to managing results through others, and you walking me through the different skills that were required as you needed to get results, not through your own expertise and what you know about your own business and maybe customers, but now being able to get exceptional results through a team indirectly. Why do you see that as being such a big skills jump? And what makes that a challenge as a transition for people to make in their careers?
Yeah, well, and Walter, I'm gonna want you to weigh in here too along the way. Yeah, so it is a big jump. It can be a big jump, particularly for business owners who started out maybe with an idea, a product, and they believed in their idea, their product, their service, and they were good at doing it, and they were good at selling it. But then they get to a certain point in the business cycle where if they don't either become a strong manager or get management on board, they're not going to be able to grow and scale beyond their own limitations, right? So it all starts really before you can manage anyone. You got to be able to hire people, and that's not an easy skill. A lot of owners that we come in contact with aren't particularly skilled in just hiring. So it begins there. What's your hiring process? And of course, you might have a job description. Hopefully, it's a written job description based on a particular function and role. So you're going to hire to those competencies, but you also should be considering your core values, your personal core values, the core values of the business. Who do we want on our bus? In other words, in regard to core values. And then, okay, so they have that. We've interviewed for it. They're strong in our values, but now too, they also seem to align with the competency. So it starts with the hiring, but then, and I was thinking about this morning, just using an analogy or story to illustrate. I have two sons, Joe and Will. One of them is actually running this podcast for us, Joe. Let's say that I needed to paint a room downstairs, and I wanted it done by a certain point, and I had certain expectations and specifications, but I wanted to scale the work, if you will. And so I was going to give that job to Joe and Will to do. Well, historically, I'd just done it myself before Joe and Will, or I hired someone, but let's just say I did it myself and got it done to a certain level of expectation and quality and within a certain period of time. Well, now I had to teach a couple of guys who had never painted before, maybe ever, or maybe they have, but now I've got certain expectations and quality expectations for my painting. So I had to set expectations, I had to teach them how to do it, then come back, trust, verify, hold them accountable, and make sure they had everything they needed to do the job that I was asking them to do. They had to have the right paint, they had to have the right paintbrush, they had to have whatever else. And they needed some encouragement along the way. So it requires patience, of course. So clear expectations, accountability, making sure they have whatever they need to do the job. These are all different skills that if you're just used to doing everything yourself, it is an adjustment, because then you have to be patient and you have to be understanding if the people doing the job for you come back and they haven't done it exactly the way you wanted it done, then how are you going to handle that? Yeah, let me just stop there. Walter, what would you add to any of that, Walter?
Yeah, I think what you said is very true. The other thing I often see is, and it's really interesting, down in North Carolina, where we have a second home, there's tons of very small businesses, and they're what you or I would describe as a lifestyle business. And these are the businesses where, if you do a good job in our neighborhood, there's no limit. Basically everyone could become your customer. So you call these people, they basically have a personal voicemail that's full. They have, no admin support, no concept of delegation, but it's a lifestyle business. They don't want the headaches of hiring a management team. And, I can look back and go, man, you could have 7 or 8 people doing what you're doing. You'd be making a ton of money. They're just not interested in that. So I think it's interesting that even the business owners around here, there are some who see what you're describing and they focus more on kind of the headaches it's going to be, as opposed to looking at it like, this is what I need to do to really build a valuable business. It's hard for them. It's kind of like equating the current pain with the potential payoff. And I think that's one of the challenges you and I face, is being able to demonstrate to them that there is an incredible payoff, not only financially down the road, but it's going to make their everyday life easier in the business if they have a team they can rely on. But it's a challenge.
Well, that's exactly right, and it really does get back to what their goals are. I mean, and what they want to accomplish, and as to whether or not they should even have a management team. But does that answer your question somewhat, Andrew?
Yeah, it speaks to one of the things. I think, Pat, I bet you've read this book that I'm holding up called The Leadership Pipeline by Ram Chamran. If you haven't, you'd really enjoy it.
I love that guy.
So yeah, he talks about, going through these different management transitions in your career, and there being a necessity for different skill requirements, time applications, and work values. We were just talking about the work values Walter brought up. Do they understand the payoff that's going to come from doing a different type of work? The skill requirements are really different too, because you might really enjoy just doing that hands-on work. And even though your business will get better if you can become a great manager, you're going to be drawn to go in and micromanage or make little improvements on something that someone on your team is doing. And that's in that first phase. In terms of kind of where this is going with, building that really transferable business, that next level management team, though, it's probably not just that phase of bringing staff that you're managing, but having an actual management team. So managing the business through others. What are the typical, pitfalls you see people hitting as they become not just a manager, but a manager of managers, where they're having to build an executive team culture, and the way that those people relate to each other? What comes to the top of your mind of kind of the early challenges that someone faces as they're doing that for the first time, especially if they're hiring well and bringing on people who are, really talented and maybe more talented than the guy who hired them in their area of expertise?
Yeah, a couple of things. Maybe expecting. You often see this with folks who are top salespeople and then move into sales management. I think this is a good example. It's not the perfect example, but it's a very good one, probably. Where, boy, they've been top sales, top 5%, maybe top salesperson for forever. And so, of course, they get asked to be a sales manager a lot of times, which it can be the worst decision ever. But they get into the role and they expect all the salespeople that report to them, that are on their sales team, to do sales the way they did and to perform at their level and just basically be them, be who they were. And it just doesn't work that way, does it? And so there's a self-awareness. There is an emotional intelligence that's required. There's an understanding that everyone is different. One salesperson may be able to be in the top 10%, and that's it. That's as far as they're ever going to go. I mean, you're going to challenge them and stretch them, but they're just not going to be able to, for whatever reason, gifting or whatever. And so you need to understand that people are different. And then, too, that they respond differently. Like you, as that top salesperson, probably responded to your sales manager's coaching or management style in a particular way. Well, that's going to be true for each one of the people on your team. They're all different people, so they're all going to respond differently. And so you're going to have to probably coach them up and hold them accountable and motivate them differently, each one of them. So I think that's one of the pitfalls is high-performing folks that come into a management role, A-types, if you will, can very quickly expect the same results that they were producing as an individual producer, and it just doesn't always work that way. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. Walter,
Yeah.
what about you? Anything on your end?
No, I think I've seen the situation you've described, and that is definitely an issue.
Yeah. Did you have something in mind, Andrew, when you asked any particular answer or thing in mind when you asked that question that I'm just not thinking of right now?
Well, it's I'm just leading to a place where, as somebody finds themselves, like, Walter said, they probably got into that business thinking, hey, I'm going to be able to, manage my voicemail, do this work, manage my customer relationships. And so as they begin to build a management team underneath them, if they do want to grow that business, they might have a hard time even telling if it's going well, because they might find that people want to work differently than they do. People might be challenging them about ways that the business could grow and be hungry for different outcomes. So I'm wondering, how just somebody who finds themselves in that role of, I started this business, I do want to grow it. I am trying to do what Pat's saying. I'm hiring people, but it seems like it's hard. I can't tell if it's going well. There could be a lot of opposing opinions on the team. They could be challenging the way I've run this business for the last 5 years. Is this going well or not? How do I know?
All right, yeah, it's okay. So I got it. So yeah, when you consider the clients that Walter and I are working with, small business owners, more often than not, they were great at whatever product or service they were delivering, and they were effective at sales, and just courageous, and they persevered through hardship But management, not so much, not always great managers. So to your point, they often find themselves in this situation because they have been so successful in product delivery and selling the product that now they've got a business that needs to be managed. So they find themselves in this situation where maybe they do listen to us and because they want to build a company that is transferable and can be sold. So they logically, they understand, okay, indeed, I'm going to need management. So then to your point or question, how does that business owner manage the managers if they're not a good manager and they really don't want to be a manager? Well, that's where maybe they've hired a COO who basically manages the managers. And then actually that's where we come in as well. We're all about serving the owner. And we actually provide coaching along the way as to that piece, in regard to, as a matter of fact, there's a call Friday morning with a client who's having who business owner, built a business, not a great manager, wants to know how to handle a particular situation with a manager. And so get coaching, I guess is what I'm saying, is get coaching where you need it to help manage the managers. And then ideally you're going to get a chief operating officer or a role like that in place who excels at management and who can manage the managers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Walter, would you add anything to that?
Like you mentioned, a lot of the clients we work with are small businesses. And, oftentimes when you're asking them you're proposing that they hire, start to hire a management team, they look at it as a fairly sizable chunk coming out of their income. I mean, in your experience, are you pretty confident in telling them that the person is going to pay for himself, or is that not necessarily the case?
I hate to answer the question like this, but it depends, doesn't it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. One of the situations where it can end up being a no, and Walter, you and I have seen this, is when the business owner has a hard time letting go with a piece that Andrew was hitting on here early in the conversation in regard to delegation.
Yeah.
They may bring in a very talented COO someone who has a lot of experience, track record, so on and so forth, comes in and starts to really manage and put management processes and systems in place. And the owner just has a hard time with it because, they've got to give up a level of control to that COO, don't they, in order to make all that happen.
Right.
And so then 6 months can go by and the owner just one day says, I can't take it anymore. I got to get rid of it. So in a case like that, no, you've invested X number of dollars and you're going to get no return.
Yeah.
Maybe even a negative return. So no, it all depends. But one of the things that most depends on is how willing that owner and how able or that owner is of changing their role and relinquishing a lot of responsibility and management to that management team.
And what would you see again, sort of for somebody who doesn't have these instincts? So let's say they do bring in a COO, they're trying to evaluate, is this person going to be a good fit? Or in those first few months, they're trying to size up. What do you think they should be looking for to see is the management team improving, not just individually, but as a group, or is management in the company improving? I know that a few years ago, you had this, the Lincoln biography, Team of Rivals, popularized that approach of like a great team, or they're going to be like challenging each other all the time. And that was one situation, but maybe not applicable everywhere. What would you say you'd be looking for? Let's say you're advising a client and they are coming to you saying, look, I don't know if the COO is working out. He's driving me crazy. He's doing things differently than I would. What are you drawing them back to say, well, look, these are the things we're going to measure, and here's how we're going to tell if this is going to be a high value management team that grows the business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first, if they come in and the business owner comes in, and that's typically the case, is communicating, boy, this hurts. This is painful. Are you sure they're doing it? And it's kind of like a golf swing. If your muscle memory has been practicing the wrong things for many years, and then you go to a great golf instructor like Steve Bostosh. He was a commercial for Steve Bostosh up at TB Dye. And Steve says, hey, okay, well, you've got to change the way you bring the club back. And then he shows you how to do it the right way. And it just hurts. It's painful. It feels weird. It's uncomfortable. It's hard because muscle memory has been the opposite. Well, so we almost expect them to do that early on. And actually, if they don't do it, then we really start to question whether or not the COO is really doing what the COO is supposed to be doing, because there should be some pain. So that doesn't alarm us at all unless it's not present. But then, then we'll just ask them, okay, is the COO demonstrating your core values the way when you hired them, you thought that their core values align with yours? Do you see that? Well, yeah, I do. They're doing things with integrity. They're responsive, so on and so forth. Okay, well, let's take a look at the job description. Where do you see that they're not with what they're doing aligning with what you've put forth in this job description that we made sure you had in place that was written? And more often than not, they're not able to do that. But every once in a while they are. And maybe it has to do with communication. Maybe they're not as strong in communication as what the owner really needs them to be. Maybe they're not as strong in not only communicating clearly the expectations, but then in the trust and verify or the accountability piece, the follow up. Maybe they don't have the ability to build relationally within the organization the way the owner would like. So there's a number of different things that you can look at to know if they're aligning with competence needed for the role as well as the values. But again, I can't stress this enough. Early on, there should be some pain.
I definitely agree. It can be painful to start, for sure.
And you've referenced a number of times, Pat, to having those values in place. And so I know that language with you. I know what you mean by that. But for listeners who wouldn't have that framework in mind, when you say like bring them back to your values, what's the exercise that a founder or business owner would have gone through where they have those defined so that they can be coming back to those consistently?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite Peter Drucker quotes is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And of course, culture, and Drucker was all about strategy, right, and management, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what is culture? It's your core values. It's the values that lead you, guide you, that are the things that are most important to you. So with each business owner that we work with, it's important to find out what matters to them most personally and in doing their business. Because if responsiveness, for example, is a core value of a business owner, and often it is, because they're very service oriented and they want their people responding quickly and they want them responding in a certain way. Well, if they hire on a manager who doesn't demonstrate that core value, doesn't embody it, foster it, and lead by it, then the owner of the company is not going to be happy. They may be very skilled, in a lot of ways, in a lot of management, but if they don't have that core value that's driving and motivating them, then the business is not going to be built the way the owner wants it to be built. Does that make sense? Did you have something else in mind for an answer to that question, Andrew? Because,
Nope.
I could very easily be interviewing you on all of this because you're a very skilled manager. You work with me as a manager. You were skilled then, and you've only gotten better through the years. Your answers would probably be more impactful.
No, I think that's right on the values conversation, and it goes into this next area that I wanted to let you elaborate on, which is, I think that I've talked about this in a small business. The people you hire first, very often they're within your network. You're often working with people you're pretty close to outside of business, and there can come a time when you're growing a business, not just where it's about making sure you're getting the right people on in that hiring process, but also evaluating the talent you have. Is this not just the right team for going from 0 to 1 million or for 1 million to 3 million a year, but hey, I want to grow. Is this the right team for 3 to 10 or 10 to 20? How would you recommend, a business owner who is proud of creating those jobs, loves the people he work with, take a step back and evaluate his or her team in a way that's objective and aligned to what they're trying to do, which is create, the most value in the business as possible. Starting with, identifying how do I know if I've got the right people? And then if I think one of them isn't, what process do I go through to validate that and to address that?
Yeah, well, that's something that we see often because, a lot of the clients, well, most of the clients that Walter and I work with, they started from nothing. They had an idea, maybe they had a truck and a tool belt, and they got started and they got some work, and then they hired on maybe a bookkeeper and or maybe some kind of admin support or something like that. Well, when they hired that person had a certain level of skill set, or certain of skill and knowledge. And let's say that person who with the truck and a tool belt just grew and grew and grew, but the skill set of that initial bookkeeper, who was actually the owner's sister, didn't grow with the business. So just like it is with the owner recognizing at some point that my ability to grow this business and scale it is going to be limited by my knowledge and ability to lead and manage if I don't expand that. Well, that same thing is true with your employees, and it can be one of the toughest. It can be very difficult to help an owner understand that. But if the people that they've hired through the years haven't grown with the business in regard to skill set, they're going to have to make some real tough decisions. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to need to get them off the bus completely. Maybe it's just a redeployment, another role, finding another role for them on the bus. But not a few times, or not, it's not infrequent where if they're going to do what's best for the organization, for the business, and even for that individual, because it doesn't serve that individual to continue on in a role that they're just not, they just don't have the capacity for. It's a hard decision, but it's a decision that needs to be made if you're going to serve the organization, be it a for-profit, a nonprofit, everyone in it, and as well as that person who is in that role currently. Walter, what would you say?
Yeah, I can relate to exactly what you're saying. I had a client recently who I've only been working with 1 year. And because of COVID, their longtime bookkeeper, I think she'd been with them for like 15 years, was kind of freaked out by COVID, didn't want to come to the office, and just really wasn't able to work remotely. So he asked me to find him a bookkeeper. So I recommended a woman that we work with. And she went in there and she found stuff that just blew us away. I mean, there were invoices that hadn't been sent for 6 months. There were checks sitting in drawers that hadn't been deposited. And he thought this person was fantastic, but I think it was the exact situation you were describing. He was a fairly small business when they started together, and he's been able to grow the business pretty substantially. And I think she just got overwhelmed and never told him. And he didn't have a strong enough handle on the financials of the company to see what was going on. So it was really, really a bad situation that we're getting straightened out right now.
So I think that's helpful. And I think that, these are the moments where I know you guys are able to do really well is coming into these most difficult conversations. And then kind of the COO conversation is a version of that. Has this business outgrown my own ability to manage, my own ability to do these things independently? But then after you've taken that lens to yourself, you have to take it to the rest of the organization too. And do I really have people in roles that serve the whole company and not just protect where we're at? There's an idea that I think his name's Lawrence Peter talks about. It's called the Peter Principle, which is that in any organization, you get promoted to your level of incompetence. And the idea is that based on your success in a past role, you get promoted until you're unsuccessful, and then you don't get promoted anymore. But that means the role you're in today is the one you're unsuccessful at. I think in a small business, it isn't just about getting promoted, but what you brought up is the needs of the company change as the company's growing. And so again, you might have been the right bookkeeper for 0 to $1 million or any other role, but those things change, and certainly the management style of the CEO, COO are going to have to change. And I think that goes into the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which is, I wanted to talk to you about management team strength and executive team strength, because I know that when buyers are looking at companies and looking to acquire companies, this is one of the top things they're looking at. This and top line revenue, perhaps. And you can see why in the conversation we've had so far. So I thought maybe because you've been on the other side of the table a number of times, or as many of your listeners are probably just thinking about hoping for the only transaction of what will be their career. Help us see it from that buyer's side, what it looks like going into these transactions. Take me into the mind of someone wanting to buy a company. What are you excited about when you're looking at a company? And what are the things you would see, particularly in a management team, that would keep you up and make you worry about whether that company would work out?
Yeah, well, let's just say that you own a company currently, Andrew, and Walter and I are thinking about buying it. And we come in and we learn pretty quickly that the business, one scenario, we learned pretty quickly that the business pretty much just runs through you. And there's really not a management team in place, period. There's some leaders, if you will, but there's not a coordinated, cohesive management team in place. And you are way too much involved with the business. Well, if we're private equity, it's a good chance we're not going to want to have anything to do with you. If we're a strategic buyer, we might still be interested because we like your product, and we're coming into your geographic area and we don't have the product and we want to bolt it on, and so on and so forth. And we've got some management that we can bring to bear. So it may not be, but it still could be with a strategic. We may be disappointed and say, okay, well, look, you want 4x for the business. We're going to give you 1x, 1.5x, but 1x now and a half x in 2 years or 3 years as you stay on and you meet the goals that you say we can meet over the next 3 years. So it's absolutely going to impact how we view the business and where the risk is, because we want to buy something that can continue to run and produce cash flow and profit and grow, go to the next level. And Walter and I talk about a next level management team, a management team that can just continue to take it to the next level. That's what we want to see when we come in to buy your company. That's when we're going to be more willing to pay a premium or pay what you want for the business. Walter, what else would you say?
Yeah, I think that's probably the number one issue we see, is that these businesses are just way too centralized upon the owner. The other thing I would just bring up is that if you do have good managers, it's very important that you've signed them to some type of non-compete, or you've got stay bonuses, that type of thing. Because, obviously it's very critical to have the team, but a buyer is certainly going to want to make sure that they're not going to jump ship when the transaction's done.
Well, that's exactly right, isn't it? I mean, if we come in and you've done a good job, Andrew, of building a management team, and we look around and say, oh, great, okay, you've done a really good job here. You've got 2 really key people in place to help you manage this small business, 2 or 3. Now, when we buy the company, what's going to keep them here? Have you done anything to make sure they're going to stay through a transition period, or not? Do you have employment agreements in place? Do you have stay bonuses in place? And where is our risk there? Could they just leave day one and take all their client relationships with them, whatever the risk is? So, so what do you think, Andrew, about that question? You've been through this kind of thing before, once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, the management team not having proven experience, but if they do seem like they've been kind of coming up with the business, but don't have prior experience with results. I mean, as a buyer, that would definitely give me pause about whether or not this company is really equipped, or whether it's propped up on that founder, and you take that founder out and these other cards kind of fall. So I'd like to know that these managers the management team had been successful in other arrangements in the past, and not just in the one configuration they have right now. That would be important to me. And then I think, there'd be the ways that, individually that they responded or talked about the business. Do they have a grasp of what the business is doing strategically and how they're growing and how their function supports that? Or are they, really kind of order takers for the CEO, just doing kind of, what's been handed down from the top? Are they strategic executives, or just kind of, middle management? It is another thing I think that I'd be looking for and would give me either confidence or take away from confidence. The other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on with this, and it's why I said, like, let's think about this. Let's help the audience think about this from the buyer's perspective, is to help them prepare for those conversations. So the other thing I think they should be prepared for is they're going into a conversation with a potential buyer. They're going to be putting their best foot forward because they're in sell mode. They want to talk about how strong the company is in these different areas. But as a buyer, you're naturally going to be circumspect about the details. You're going to want to pressure test things, just like when you're getting sold a car or a house. You want to kind of walk through the crawl space, kick the tires, what have you. As a buyer, what would you all be wanting to look at to inspect how strong the business really is, to validate the story that you're getting, the picture that's being painted by the owner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there are a number of value drivers that if I was doing due diligence on a company I was buying, first, of course, would be the financials. Are they strong? Are they integrous? And is there a plan for growth, and is it realistic? And then, yes, indeed, do you have a management team in place that can accomplish that growth plan and maybe even take it to the next level? Looking at cash flow in and out, looking at customer service quality, the quality of customer service. It's systems and processes, of course. Are there any in place? Are they current? Is everything still done on paper? Or are we using technology in the right way? And so let's see, what else? What's coming to your mind, Walter? Those are the key drivers that come to my mind right away. Of course, what we've been talking about here today, the management team.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to my mind, especially with the clients that we work with, could be, the risk associated with concentration of customer base. And that's, oftentimes that's a reflection that they don't have a good sales team. Everything's running through the owner. He's got his connections that he's had forever. And that client, one or two clients is really big. So again, I think that's one of the risks that you can kind of manage if you've put a good team in place.
Yeah, concentration. That's concentration, not just of customer base, but also suppliers or key employees. If you're overly dependent on one employee, that's going to impact the value of your business.
Yeah.
So I think I guess I got two more questions I want to. So we've talked about some of the things that would be, I think, most difficult for a business owner who's had some success, but the things they're going to have to encounter along the way to really growing their business and making it transferable, making it saleable, and maximizing value for that. We talked about giving up some level of control, being able to bring in people who can help you grow to a place where you just have a skill gap, that COO type role. We talked about evaluating, have the people grown with the company? That's a really difficult evaluation. I think a third and final one, and it probably applies especially to those lifestyle businesses as Walter described them, is this idea not of just the management control of the company, but control of the finances, of the financial rewards, of, well, what's in it if we do have a successful exit. So when you're thinking about a management team, I would say that, to make any successful transaction, you want that executive team on board, pushing for it, trying to grow the business, being able to put in the hours doing that. That comes with, them having their own sense of future, their own best interests tied up in that idea of having a sale. So how would you advise, and there's a lot of different variables here, but how would you advise an owner to approach the initial conversations with their managers of, I want to be able to sell this business in the next 3 to 5 years, and here's how I'm going to enroll, get you guys excited about that, get them on board for it. And there's a lot of nuance there, but high level, how would you advise someone to prepare for and approach that conversation? What are they thinking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so certainly a robust employee benefits package, or you probably wouldn't have even attracted them in the first place. but then too, yeah, and we also we often see deficiency here in regard to incentive planning. What you're talking about is incentive planning, and incentive to reward them for helping you the owner to accomplish your goals for growth and exit. So the incentive plan, whatever it is, aligned with whatever your goals are. If in order to sell your business for what you want to sell it for, you're going to have to increase the top line. That's what you're going to have to do. Then your incentive plans need to be aligned with that. But it could be different for different people in the organization, right? For the salesperson or people, it could be top line incentives. For ops, it may be profitability. But the big idea is making sure that there's an incentive plan to begin with, and then that it's aligned with whatever goals you have for whatever roles we're talking about. And, the incentive planning, and we're not deep experts on incentive planning, we just recognize the importance of it, and we know it generally. And then it's basically deciding on a combination of cash incentives versus equity, and then and then what that's going to look like, options. Most of the businesses that Walter and I work with, they're smaller, 35 million or under in revenue, and a lot of them are the cash-based non-deferred comp combined with just cash bonuses are probably going to be the best, or often the best solution. But occasionally equity and some form or another, restricted stock, restricted stock or options. But anyway, those are the big ideas. Walter, what would you say?
Yeah, I would agree that one of the big weaknesses, we often see is just either, what the business owner thinks is an incentive comp plan is really just, let's just give everybody $5,000 or $10,000 at the end of the year type thing. But it is really cool how a well-designed incentive comp plan can benefit everybody, because the employee who's impacted by it, if he does a good job, his income goes up. The value of the business is going to go up by a multiple of whatever that guy is able to accomplish. So the owner really makes out. So a well-designed incentive comp plan can really be an incredible thing. So that's really, I would just echo what you said about that.
Yeah, and in the cases, and again, it's unusual. Most of the time, it's like Walter said. If the company does well, everybody gets a bonus at the end of the year. It's kind of like that typically. But in the rare case where they've thought through it more, and there are incentives aligned with goals and performance and so on and so forth, almost always what is overlooked is retention. Yeah, during a transition. So if you saw your company today, Andrew, you've done a really good job of incenting your management team to help you grow it to the point where you're going to be able to sell it. Yet during the transition, there's nothing in place to keep them there for the next couple of years during,
and Pat, I would say, one thing I've noticed, because a lot of our clients, a lot of our tax clients are professional service firms. So their employees tend to be, somewhat sophisticated. And I think a lot of them, I think there's two things going on. One is a lot of the employees want some type of ownership benefit. And number two, the employers are realizing that they're not going to be able to keep their people unless they can offer them some more creative compensation. So we've got a number of clients, surprisingly, over the past couple of years who have been, some type of phantom stock plan where they, they're not bringing these people on as owners, but they've got an agreement where, if the company hits certain financial targets, they're going to get to share in that. So it's a little bit more of it's kind of a fancier profit sharing plan, but it gives the employees a sense of ownership and can really prepare them to become owners someday. So I am actually seeing more of that over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Andrew, let us turn the tables on you. You've been through this a couple of times. What as a as a key employee, as a manager on a management team, what are the kind of things that that you like to see in regard to incentives?
Well, I think that there's before even getting to incentives, the process of socializing and getting those key employees on board with why this sale or why pursuing this course of action is good for them, is good for the business, is something you have to consider with each individual, because they're each going to have different hopes. The guy who's leading your sales could have a different version of what a happy future is than the guy leading kind of your customer delivery or managing your suppliers. So I think it has to be tailored to each of them, and handled one-on-one, but then brought into a group consensus over time where everyone knows that everyone's on board, so you can be rowing together. So tailored to that individual. Some people needing different boosts. You mentioned the importance of retention plans where they have a reason to stay on board afterward and not think, well, I guess I maximized on this. Time to go look for my next thing. It is certainly important. And then I think that you want them to want to drive up the value of the deal. And so I think I was thinking about, when I was prepping questions for this, Pat, what are some of the hard conversations that I could be encouraging your listeners to bring Pat and Walter into? And one of them is just that, well, okay, do I need to carve out part of that transaction for key employees, for the management team? And if so, tear off the Band-Aid. Like, what percent am I looking at here? Is that, if I've been dreaming of selling this business for 10 million, am I talking about 5%, 10%, 18%? So I think that those are things that are going to be individual to the business, obviously, in a lot of ways. But that having been thought through well, and that decision not just being done out of an initial, well, this is what I can stand apart with, but out of strategically, what's it going to take to get this team excited? Because with a management team that's excited to grow the value of the business, again, as Walter was saying with the incentive plan, the owner's going to get a multiple on that. But in the short term, it can still be painful to evaluate that. If you grew everything from scratch, you're 100% owner, you've been paying 100% of the taxes, and you've always expected to kind of get 100% of the sale. So that's just another conversation that I thought, these are the difficult ones that, with respect to building, maintaining, developing, refining a great management team. Some of the things I thought, man, listeners should be asking you about this stuff if they don't know to already, because these are areas where you both bring a lot of clarity and experience to something that probably a lot of your clients or people you're talking to are doing for the first time in their careers, just by virtue of they started this business. So that was it. I appreciate the chance to talk through these things with you, but that's everything I wanted to say. I guess I would ask at the end just how you would how someone would, let's say that they are listening to this and their mind is still back 20 minutes ago thinking about that COO and like, I need to take a look at that. How would someone kind of do an assessment and know, am I ready, and where are the risk areas if I do want to make this jump and really pursue exit readiness?
Yeah, great question. They can just contact us and we'll help them think through it. First off, again, it just starts with what their goals are, because we may have a conversation with them and find out that, the best thing for you based on everything you want to do is just have a lifestyle business and not even go down this road. And then there's the personal planning elements that we don't actually do, but we're much experienced in, and we can recognize the gaps in, pertaining to their personal financial planning and their personal estate planning and things like that we can ask them some questions about and just find out more about their entire life, because business for a small business owner is personal. And so it really starts with understanding what it is that they want to accomplish in life in totality, believe it or not, as to whether or not they actually hire a COO, because it's not an inexpensive decision, and it's a life-changing decision in a lot of ways. And so it really needs to align with all of their personal personal goals and aspirations. So they could just contact us and we'll help them think through it. Andrew, can't thank you enough, buddy, for joining us. Thanks for turning tables on us. It was fun to do this. Hope you come back and let us interview you about accounts-based management. And you did a great job. You're a great interviewer. My goodness gracious, makes me think that we should hire you to interview us regularly. Maybe there's if this whole account-based management thing doesn't work out for you, which it absolutely is, there could be a future for you in interviewing on podcasts. So thank you. And
yeah, you're welcome.
And listeners, we can't emphasize strongly enough, strong management team. If indeed you want to build value in your business, if you want to transfer it one way or another, either in sale to an outsider, a third party, or transfer it to family members eventually, you're going to need to put a management team in place. And the sooner you go about doing that, the better. It's hard work. It's not inexpensive, and so it's better to budget both the time and the money. And the sooner you get about it, the sooner you'll start to grow and scale and add value to your company. Walter, do you have any last parting thoughts before you before you close us out here?
No, I think this has been great. I'm glad Andrew suggested this. The listeners got an opportunity to listen to your expertise in that whole area of building management teams. So I think it's been very helpful. So Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to promote today on behalf of Triblio?
Well, if anybody is thinking about, how to find, like their next best customers and focus their marketing sales efforts better on closing them and kind of growing during this economic downturn we have, finding who's still in market and being able to engage them, then you're welcome to check out Triblio.com, get an overview of what our platform does there. I'd be happy to have any conversations with you. But I also, just encourage you to follow up on what, Pat was saying there about thinking about these things, getting in touch with them. A lot of what I've learned, and I'm just really echoing here, bringing you guys into the conversations I got to have with Pat over lunch over many, many years, and encourage as many of you guys to share in that experience as I had. Fantastic. So if someone wanted to contact you personally, how would they go about doing that? They could find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Mahr, M-A-H-R, or they could just write me, Andrew@Triblio.com, Triblio. Fantastic. Thanks again. Yep. And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860. You can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can also access resources at ExitReadiness.com, GRFCPA.com, and NSLP.com. As always, thanks for listening, and until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.